Known as the Tyneside Strangler, Mary Bell was just 11 years old when she was convicted of killing 2 young boys in 1968. It is hard to imagine that a child with anything approaching a normal, loving upbringing could have committed such heinous crimes at so young an age. Indeed, she was an unwanted and neglected child. When she was born on the 26th of May, 1957, her 17-year-old mother, Betty McCricket, rejected her, telling the midwife, "Take the thing away from me." Mary's care was taken over by her grandmother. However, she could not escape the malign influence of her mother. Betty and later her husband, Billy Bell, a violent alcoholic and habitual criminal, continued to live in the family home in Gateshead. At the age of just 1, Mary nearly died under the wheels of a lorry in what would be the first of a series of puzzling accidents. To add to her distress, Betty and Billy threw Mary's grandmother out, so she was deprived of her emotional mainstay. Betty said she could not cope with looking after her children and was often away. Mary was farmed out to relatives and friends who noticed that she was cold and detached and failed to bond with others. When she was 3, Betty took Mary to an adoption agency and gave her to a mentally unstable woman who had been prevented from adopting as she was emigrating to Australia. Betty's sister, who had followed her, got the child back, but Betty would not let her and her husband adopt the child. They noted that Mary never cried when she was hurt, but screamed and stamped when she did not get her own way. While she was not spanked at home, she resorted to violence from an early age. Once, she threatened to bash her uncle's face in and hit him with a toy gun. The family feared for Mary's life in her mother's care. Another uncle hurt his back, saving Mary when Betty dropped her from a first-floor window. On another occasion, Mary was rushed to hospital to have her stomach pumped, having taken an overdose of sleeping pills allegedly given to her by her mother. 5 weeks later, a child who was out on the street with Mary was run over by a bus. At kindergarten, Mary gained a reputation as an habitual liar. She was a disruptive influence and sometimes expressed a desire to hurt people. Told not to put her hands around another child's throat, she said, "Why? Can I kill him?" When Billy was arrested for armed robbery, Betty turned to prostitution as a dominatrix and used Mary as a prop in her sadomasochistic encounters. Soon Mary said she was forced into sexual acts with men. Despite her hating this, she was sharp enough to begin taking money on her own account, while her mother became increasingly violent, calling her daughter the devil's spawn. Clearly, with a background like that, things were not going to turn out well. There were sudden mood swings that made other children avoid her. However, she did find a soulmate, the daughter of a neighbor, whose name was Norma Bell, though she was no relation. Norma was 2 years older, but Mary was the dominant one in the relationship. On the 11th of May, 1968, Mary and Norma were playing with a 3-year-old boy on top of an air raid shelter when the boy fell, cutting open his head. He said that one of the girls had pushed him, though he was not sure which. The next day, the mothers of 3 small girls, all about 6, complained to the police that Mary had tried to choke them. A constable visited. Both Mary and Norma denied pushing the boy off the air raid shelter and trying to strangle the 3 girls. However, Norma said Mary had tried to throttle each of them, explaining, "Mary went to one of the girls and said, 'What happens if you choke someone? Do they die?' Then Mary put both hands round the girl's throat and squeezed. The girl started to go purple. I told Mary to stop, but she wouldn't. Then she put her hands around Pauline's throat and she started go purple as well. Another girl, Susan Cornish, came up and Mary did the same thing to her. Mary was given a reprimand, though no charges were filed. Soon afterwards, Norma's father found Mary choking his daughter and had to give her a slap to make her release her grip. 2 weeks later, on the day before Mary's 11th birthday, 2 boys playing in an abandoned house found the body of 4-year-old Martin Brown. When a local workman tried to administer CPR, Mary and Norma turned up and had to been ordered out when the police arrived. They then went to the home of Martin's aunt and told her, "One of your sister's bairns has just had an accident. We think it's Martin, but we can't tell because there's blood all over him." As no cause of death was immediately apparent, it was assumed that the 4-year-old had swallowed pills from a discarded bottle found nearby, and the coroner's court returned an open verdict. Later, a local nursery school was broken into and vandalized. Investigating police found a note full of misspellings and obscenities. One jotting said, "We did murder Martin Brown." Another made the same admission, and all of them mentioned murder. That same day, Mary drew a child in the same pose as Martin had been found in. She also noted that there had been a boy who just laid down and died. Mary was the only pupil who made a reference to the dead boy. A few days later, Mary turned up at the Brown residence. When his grieving mother told her he was dead, Mary said, "Oh, I know. I wanted to see him in his coffin." The following day, there was another break-in at the nursery school. This time, the police were alerted by a newly installed alarm. Nearby, they found Mary and Norma, who denied that they had been involved in the previous break-in. After they were released into the custody of their parents, Mary began spreading rumors that Norma had been responsible for the death of Martin Brown. On the afternoon of the 31st of July, 3-year-old Brian Howe went missing. During the ensuing search, Mary told Brian's older sister that she had seen her brother playing near some concrete blocks on a vacant lot. His body was found there, barely covered in clumps of grass and weeds. He had been strangled, and his legs, stomach, and genitals had been mutilated with a pair of broken scissors found at the scene. This fact later convinced Detective Chief Inspector James Dobson that Mary was the killer. A pathologist suggested that the killer was a child since little force had been used. All the children in the area were questioned. Mary said that she had seen Brian being beaten by an 8-year-old carrying a pair of broken scissors. She immediately came under suspicion as the discovery of the scissors had not been made public. Norma said that she had been with Mary when they stumbled across Brian's body and that Mary had admitted killing him. At the police station, Norma confessed that she had been with Mary when she attacked the boy but had run away when she had gone all funny and began strangling him. She had returned to find Mary cutting his hair and legs and mutilating his penis with the scissors. A razor blade had also been used to carve the lettering, later amended 2M, on the child's stomach. Norma told the police that the razor blade could be found under a rock, where they recovered it. Confronted with this, Mary demanded to see a solicitor and accused the police of brainwashing her. She then retaliated by accusing Norma of the murder of Brian Howe. In the statement she gave to the police, Mary said, "Brian started to cry, and Norma asked him if he had a sore throat. She started to squeeze his throat and he started to cry. She said, 'This isn't where the lady comes. It's over there by them big blocks.' We went over to the blocks and she says, 'Or you'll have to lie down.' And he lay down beside the blocks where he was found. Norma says, 'Put your neck up.' And he did. Then she got hold of his neck and said, 'Put it down.' She started to feel up and down his neck. She squeezed it hard. You could tell it was hard because her fingertips were going white. Brian was struggling and I was pulling her shoulders, but she went mad. I was pulling her chin up, but she screamed at me." By this time she had banged Brian's head on some wood or corner of wood, and Brian was lying senseless. His face was all white and bluey and his eyes were open. His lips were purplish and had all like slaver on. It turned into something like fluff. Norma covered him up and I said, "Norma, I've got nothing to do with this. I should tell on you, but I'll not." Norma was acting kind of funny and making twitchy faces and spreading her fingers out. She said, "This is the first, but it'll not be the last." I was frightened
Then Norma went into the house, and she got a pair of scissors, and she put them down her pants. She says, "Go and get a pen." I said, "No, what for?" She says, "To write a note on his stomach," and I wouldn't get the pen. She had a Gillette razor blade. It had Gillette on. We went back to the blocks, and Norma cut his hair. She tried to cut his leg and his ear with the blade. Forensics found gray fibers from Mary's woolen dress on the bodies of both Brian and Martin's bodies, and maroon fibers from Norma's skirt were found on Brian's shoes. When Brian's coffin was brought out for the funeral procession, Mary was standing there. DCI Dobson said she stood there laughing and rubbing her hands. I thought, my God, I've got to bring her in. She'll do another one. Both Mary and Norma were charged with murder. They were tried at Newcastle Assizes in December 1968. Both pleaded not guilty and testified in their own defense. Despite their young age, the judge allowed the press to print their names and photographs. Norma admitted that she had not alerted some boys who were nearby when Mary had started strangling Brian. "I did not know what was going to happen in the first place," she said, insisting she had never touched the child. Clearly she was believed and was acquitted of all charges. In his summing up, the judge, Mr. Justice Cusack, said of Mary, "She has told 4 stories, and having told 4 stories, it is inconceivable that the jury would believe any one of them. She had fabricated. She is a very sick child. One can only hope that she can be given treatment to help her." However, the jury found Mary Bell guilty only of manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. She was detained at Her Majesty's pleasure, as it was judged that she was a grave risk to other children. Released in 1980, she was given a new identity and has gone on to become a mother and a grandmother. 18 years after her release, Mary Bell cooperated with distinguished journalist Gitta Sereni, who had already published The Case of Mary Bell in 1972, to write Cries Unheard, the story of Mary Bell. In it, she revealed the grisly story of her early childhood, but that did not assuage her guilt, as she herself pointed out. There are many unhappy, very disturbed kids out there who don't end up robbing families of their children.